High Mediator Othran had lived for 900 years. He had studied 1,000 species. He had ended wars, built alliances, and turned bitter enemies into close friends. In all that time, he had never met a species he could not understand. Until the humans. He had read their file many times since first contact 5 years ago. They were a young species, barely able to travel between stars. Their history was filled with violence. They had fought each other constantly, killing millions of their own kind over land, resources, religion, and ideas. The psychological profiles described them as emotionally unstable and prone to irrational behavior. The Concord's experts had classified them as a species that needed guidance. With time and patience, they would learn the ways of peace. They would understand that violence solved nothing. They would grow up and become proper members of galactic civilization. But now, watching the Perseverance break away from the Concord fleet and accelerate toward Meridian 7, Othran felt something strange. He felt confused. The humans were not behaving according to their profile. They were not acting like a primitive species that needed to be taught. They were acting like they knew exactly what they were doing. High Mediator, his aide said. The human vessel is on an intercept course with the station. Their weapons are charging. They can't be serious, Othran murmured. 1 ship against 3 ascended cruisers? They'll be destroyed in minutes. Perhaps they haven't calculated the odds correctly. Perhaps. But even as he said it, Othran did not believe it. There was something in Captain Vasquez's eyes that told him. She knew exactly what she was facing. He remembered something from the human file. During the cultural exchange, a human historian had been asked how humanity dealt with hostage situations. Her answer had been simple. We don't negotiate with terrorists. At the time, Othran had marked the response as primitive. Surely no civilized species would refuse to negotiate. Negotiation was the foundation of peace. To reject, it was to embrace chaos. But now he wondered if he had missed something important. A new signal appeared on his screens, then another, then 5 more. Human ships were dropping out of faster-than-light travel all around the station. They came from every direction. Small ships and large ships. Military vessels and converted civilian craft. Within minutes, 10 human vessels had formed a ring around the ascended position. Othran stared at the display. They planned this. The Perseverance was never alone. It appears so, High Mediator. Captain Vasquez was stalling. She was buying time. Time for reinforcements to arrive. A new voice crackled across all channels. It was older than Vasquez's, deeper and harder. This is Admiral Chun of the United Nations Emergency Response Fleet. To the forces occupying Meridian 7, you have 30 minutes to release all hostages and surrender yourselves. This is your only warning. There will be no negotiations. There will be no second chances. You will comply, or you will be destroyed. The Ascended Commander's response came quickly. His voice was calm, almost amused. You threaten us with death? We do not fear death. We welcome it. Your weapons mean nothing to us. Good, Admiral Chun replied. Then you won't mind when we use them. 29 minutes. The channel closed. Othran turned to his tactical officer. Analysis. Can the human fleet defeat the Ascended? The officer studied his screens. Unknown. High Mediator. The humans are significantly outgunned. The Ascended cruisers are larger, better armed, and better shielded. However, he hesitated. However, the human fleet is positioning itself in an unusual formation. They are spreading out, creating multiple angles of attack. If they strike simultaneously from all directions, they could overwhelm the Ascended defenses through sheer numbers. But the casualties would be significant. How significant? Conservative estimate, 30 to 40% of their forces. Possibly higher. Othran felt a chill run through him. They know this? They know they will lose nearly half their ships? They must know, High Mediator. The calculations are not difficult. And they're doing it anyway. Yes. Othran sat back in his chair, trying to process what he was seeing. In 11,000 years of galactic history, no species had ever willingly accepted such losses for a rescue mission. Lives were precious. Resources were limited. A rational species would calculate the cost and benefit, and they would conclude that losing hundreds of their own people to save thousands of strangers was not worthwhile. But the humans were not calculating. They were not debating. They were not weighing costs and benefits. They were simply acting. He thought about their history again. All those wars, all that death, all that suffering. The Concord had viewed it as a sign of primitiveness, proof that humans had not evolved beyond their animal instincts. But what if it was something else? What if all that conflict had taught them something that peaceful species never learned? What if they understood, in a way that the Concord could not, that some enemies would never stop? That some threats could not be talked away? The Ascended certainly could not be reasoned with. They wanted extinction. They would not negotiate because they had nothing to negotiate for. Their goal was not to gain something. It was to destroy everything. The Concord's response had been to try harder, to propose more creative solutions, to search for some hidden desire that could be satisfied. The human response was different. They saw an enemy that could not be stopped with words, so they prepared to stop them with weapons. Simple, direct, brutal, and Othran realized with growing horror, probably effective. High Mediator, his aide said quietly. The Concord Council is asking for guidance. What should we do? Othran watched the human fleet move into attack position. He watched the Ascended cruisers power up their weapons. He watched the clock tick, down toward the moment when words would end and violence would begin. We wait, he said finally, and we watch, and perhaps we learn. Learn what, High Mediator? Othran did not answer for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something that might have been shame. How to deal with those who cannot be reasoned with. Because clearly, we have forgotten. Commander James Okonkwo stood before the assault teams in the cargo bay of the Perseverance. 50 soldiers in combat armor. The best humanity had to offer. Every one of them knew they might not come back. Listen up, Okonkwo said. Here's what we're facing. 42,000 hostages on Meridian 7. 300 of them are ours. The Ascended have wired the station's main reactor to explode if we try a direct assault. Their commander thinks we'll back down because we value life, and they don't. He pulled up a holographic map of the station. It rotated slowly, showing corridors, rooms, and access points. He's wrong. The plan was insane by galactic standards. While the fleet engaged the Ascended cruisers in space, assault teams would breach the station at 47 different points simultaneously. Electronic warfare specialists would scramble the detonation signal for exactly 11 seconds. That was the window. 11 seconds to get inside before the Ascended could blow the reactor. The maintenance corridors, Okonkwo continued, highlighting the map. The Ascended are big, 7 feet tall, most of them. These tunnels are designed for repair drones. 4 feet wide, 3 feet high. They can't fit. We can. He looked at his soldiers. We'll be crawling through those tunnels while a battle rages around us. We'll emerge behind enemy lines, and then we push. Hard and fast. No stopping. No hesitation. We clear every corridor, secure every hostage, and neutralize every threat. A young soldier raised her hand. Sir, what about the reactor? If they manage to trigger the detonation. Squad 7, Okonkwo said. That's Captain Vasquez's team. They'll be hitting the reactor control room directly. Their job is to disable the failsafe before the Ascended can use it. Everything depends on them. And if they fail, Okonkwo was quiet for a moment. Then we all die, but so do the Ascended. And the hostages at least had a chance. He saw the fear in their eyes. He understood it. But he also saw something else: determination, resolve, the willingness to do what had to be done. The Concord thinks we're being reckless, he said. They think we're acting without thinking. But they don't understand our history. They've never had to storm a hijacked airplane. They've never had to rescue hostages from a building full of fanatics. They've never faced an enemy who wanted to die. He stood straighter. We have. We've been doing this for centuries. This is just a bigger building. Now get to your breaching pods. We launch in 10 minutes. The assault began exactly on schedule. The human fleet struck the Ascended cruisers from all directions at once. Missiles and energy beams filled the space around the station. One human ship exploded in the first 30 seconds. Then another. But the fleet kept pressing, kept attacking, drawing the Ascended's attention outward. While the battle raged, 47 breaching pods launched from the human ships. They were small, fast, and hard to track. Most of them made it to the station's hull. A few were destroyed by defensive fire. The soldiers inside died instantly. The survivors cut through the station's skin and poured inside. Okonkwo led his team through a maintenance tunnel barely wide enough for his shoulders. The metal walls pressed against him on all sides. He could hear gunfire in the distance, muffled by layers of steel and plastic. His people were fighting. His people were dying. They emerged in a storage bay behind the main corridor. 3 Ascended. Soldiers stood guard, their backs to the maintenance hatch. They never saw the attack coming. Okonkwo's team moved like water, flowing through the station's corridors. They encountered resistance at every turn. The Ascended were fierce fighters, unafraid of death, willing to throw themselves at the humans without hesitation. But the humans had trained for this. They had practiced for this. They knew how to fight enemies who did not fear dying. You didn't try to scare them. You didn't try to wound them. You killed them quickly and efficiently, and you moved on. In the reactor control room, Captain Vasquez and her team faced the hardest fight of all. 20 Ascended soldiers guarded the failsafe controls. The commander himself stood at the center, his hand resting on a large red switch. "Come any closer, and I trigger the detonation," he said calmly. "We all die together." Vasquez kept her rifle raised. "You're going to trigger it anyway. That's your whole plan." "True, but I can trigger it now, or I can trigger it in 40 hours. Your choice. How about a third option?" Vasquez said. "You surrender, and nobody dies today." The commander laughed. It was a strange sound, empty of any real emotion. "You still don't understand. Death is not a threat to us. Death is the goal. We are already dead. We are merely waiting for our bodies to catch up." "Then why haven't you triggered it yet?" The commander paused. It was a small hesitation, barely noticeable. But Vasquez had been trained to notice such things. "You want to see our faces when it happens," she said. "You want to watch us realize we failed. That's why you're waiting. Not because you're afraid of dying. Because you want to enjoy our fear first." The commander's eyes narrowed. "You think you understand us?" "I think you are just like every other terrorist we've ever faced. You talk about ideals and philosophy, but deep down, you just want to see people suffer. You dress it up in big words, but you're nothing special. We've seen your kind before. We've stopped your kind before." She took a step forward. The commander's hand tightened on the switch. One more step and Vasquez moved. Not forward sideways. In the same instant, her sniper, hidden in a ventilation shaft above, took the shot. The commander's hand exploded in a spray of blood and bone. The switch fell to the floor, untriggered. The Ascended soldiers surged forward. The battle was brutal and short. When it was over, 7 of Vasquez's team were dead. But the reactor was safe. Vasquez picked up the detonation switch and crushed it under her boot. "Station secure," she said into her communicator. "All hostages alive. Repeat, all hostages alive." Across the station, human soldiers heard the news. They had lost 217 of their own. Nearly 600 more were wounded. But 42,000 people would go home to their families. The price was paid. The mission was complete. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Galactic Concorde watched in stunned silence, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. The Galactic Concorde had kept peace for 11,000 years. Every species in the known galaxy understood one simple truth: war was wasteful and talking was better. When two species had a problem, they sat down and discussed it. They made deals. They shared resources. They found middle ground. This was how civilized beings behaved. The system worked because everyone followed the rules. The gas-breathing Velthari followed the rules. The crystal-minded Korath followed the rules. Even the warlike Threshenak had learned to follow the rules after a few centuries of guidance. Peace was logical. Peace was efficient. Peace was the only sensible choice. Then the Pale Doctrine came. They called themselves the Ascended. They were a splinter group from the ancient Kethler species, and they believed something terrible. They believed that biological life was a mistake. They thought that every living creature in the galaxy was a disease that needed to be cured. They did not want land. They did not want money. They did not want power. They wanted extinction. Complete, total, and permanent. When their ships appeared near orbital station Meridian 7, no one was worried at first. The station held 42,000 people from dozens of species. Among them were 300 humans from the recently discovered planet called Earth. The humans were new to the galaxy, having made first contact only 5 years ago. They were still learning how things worked out here in the stars. The Ascended ships surrounded the station in minutes. Their soldiers boarded before anyone could react. By the time the Concorde received the distress signal, it was already over. 42,000 hostages. The largest crisis in 300 years. The High Council of the Concorde gathered immediately. High Mediator Othran, a being of great age and greater patience, took charge of the response. He had solved 1,000 disputes in his long career. He had brought enemies together and turned hatred into friendship. This situation was dangerous, yes, but he had seen dangerous situations before. He opened a communication channel to the Ascended Commander. "I am High Mediator Othran of the Galactic Concorde," he said, his voice calm and warm. "I understand that you have concerns. I understand that you feel unheard. Let us discuss your grievances. The Concorde is prepared to listen. The Concorde is prepared to offer solutions. Tell us what you need." The Ascended Commander appeared on the screen. He was tall and thin, with pale skin stretched over sharp bones. His eyes held no anger, no passion, no emotion at all. He looked at Othran the way someone might look at an insect. "You misunderstand," the commander said. "There are no grievances. There is no negotiation. In 72 hours, every living being on this station will be processed into component atoms. Their organic matter will be recycled into fuel for our ships. This is not a threat. This is a scheduled event. We are informing you as a courtesy." The transmission ended. Othran tried again. And again. And again. Each time, the Ascended Commander repeated the same message. There were no demands. There was no ransom. There was simply a countdown, and at the end of that countdown, 42,000 people would die. The Concorde's greatest minds gathered to analyze the situation. Psychologists studied the Ascended's belief system. Historians searched for similar cases in the records. Diplomats proposed creative solutions. Perhaps they could offer the Ascended an uninhabited world to settle. Perhaps they could provide them with resources for their ships. Perhaps they could find some hidden desire, some secret want that could be satisfied. But there was nothing. The Ascended wanted only death. They could not be bribed because they did not value wealth. They could not be threatened because they did not fear dying. They could not be reasoned with because their reasoning led to only one conclusion. All life must end. The hours ticked by. 68 hours remaining. 64. 60. Aboard the human diplomatic vessel UN's Perseverance, Captain Elena Vasquez watched the Concorde's debates with growing frustration. She was a small woman with dark hair and hard eyes. She had served in the United Nations Space Force for 20 years. She had seen combat. She had lost friends. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that the Concorde was wasting precious time. Her first officer, Commander James Okonkwo, stood beside her on the bridge. He was watching the same feeds, his face grim. "They're still trying to negotiate," Vasquez said quietly. "That's what they do, ma'am. It's worked for them for 11,000 years. It's not going to work now." "No, ma'am. It's not." Vasquez was silent for a long moment. 300 human beings were trapped on that station. Families, scientists, children. They had come to the stars full of hope, eager to join the galactic community. And now they were going to die because the galaxies, most advanced civilization, didn't know how to handle someone who couldn't be reasoned with. She made her decision. "Open a channel to the Concorde flagship," she ordered. The communication officer obeyed. Moments later, High Mediator Othran's face appeared on screen. He looked tired. He looked worried. But he still carried himself with the dignity of someone who believed that peace was always possible. "Captain Vasquez," he said, "how may I assist you?" "You can stay out of our way," Vasquez replied. "We're going to get our people back." Othran blinked, confused. "Captain, I understand your concern, but we must follow proper procedures. The Ascended must be made to understand that violence is not the answer. We are preparing a new proposal that addresses their core philosophy. If we can just—" "High Mediator," Vasquez interrupted. "Those people have less than 60 hours to live. Your proposals haven't worked. Your negotiations haven't worked. Nothing has worked because there is nothing to negotiate. The Ascended don't want anything except death. Hours are their own, they don't care which. But surely, no, I'm sorry, but no. Where we come from, we learned a long time ago that some people cannot be talked down. Some people don't want to make a deal. Some people just want to watch the world burn." She leaned forward, her eyes hard. "We call them terrorists. And we don't negotiate with terrorists." Othran spread his hands, a gesture of peaceful appeal. "Captain, please. Violence will only make things worse. If you attack, they will kill the hostages immediately. You will accomplish nothing except more death." Vasquez smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "High Mediator, my species has been dealing with hostage situations for centuries. We know exactly what we're doing. The only question is whether you're going to help us or get in our way." She didn't wait for his answer. Perseverance out. The channel closed. Vasquez turned to her crew, her voice steady and certain. "Send the signal to all human vessels in range. Operation Swift Justice is a go. We have 56 hours to save 42,000 lives." She looked at the station on her view screen, surrounded by enemy ships. "And God help anyone who tries to stop us." The battle was over. The station was safe. And the Galactic Concorde had no idea what to do next. High Mediator Othran sat in his private chambers, staring at the reports on his screen. 217 humans dead. 600 wounded. 3 Ascended cruisers destroyed. The hostile occupation of Meridian 7 ended in 4 hours. 4 hours. The Concorde had spent nearly 2 days debating proposals and analyzing psychological profiles. The humans had spent 4 hours killing the enemy and saving the hostages. The contrast was painful to consider. His aide entered quietly. High Mediator, Admiral Chun has agreed to meet with you. She is waiting in the conference chamber. Othran nodded and rose from his chair. He felt old suddenly. 900 years of experience, and he had never felt so uncertain. Admiral Chun was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She wore her uniform like armor, her medals displayed proudly on her chest. She stood when Othran entered, but she did not bow. "Admiral," Othran said, taking his seat across from her. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me." "You have questions," Chun said. It was not a question. Many questions. But I suppose I should start with the most important one. He folded his hands on the table. "How did you know? How did you know that force was the only answer?" Chun was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was calm and measured. "Do you know how many hostage situations humanity has faced in our history, High Mediator? Thousands. Tens of thousands. We have learned, through centuries of experience, to recognize the difference between someone who wants something and someone who wants nothing. I don't understand. Most hostage takers want something: money, power, freedom for their friends, release of prisoners. They take hostages because they believe it will help them get what they want. With those people, you can negotiate. You can find common ground. You can make deals." She leaned forward. "But some hostage takers don't want anything. They just want to hurt people. They want to watch the world burn. They take hostages not to bargain, but to create suffering. With those people, negotiation is not possible. It never was. Every minute you spend talking is a minute they spend enjoying your helplessness." Othran considered this. "And you knew the Ascended were this second type." "We knew it the moment they said there were no demands. The moment they told you the death of the hostages was a scheduled event. They weren't trying to get something from you. They were trying to hurt you. The hostages weren't leverage. They were victims waiting to happen. But the risk," Othran said. "Your people died. Many of them. How can you justify such losses?" Chun's eyes hardened. "How can you justify not acting? 200 of my people are dead." "That's true. It hurts more than I can express. But 42,000 people are alive because of what we did. If we had followed your plan, if we had spent another 2 days debating while the clock ran down, every single one of those hostages would be dead, including 300 of our own citizens." She shook her head. "We don't throw away lives carelessly, High Mediator. Every soldier who died had a family, friends, dreams. We mourn each one. But we also understand something that your peaceful civilization never had to learn. Sometimes the cost of not acting is higher than the cost of acting. Sometimes people die so that others can live." "That sounds like a calculation," Othran said. "A cold mathematical equation." "No, that's where you're wrong." Chen's voice softened slightly. "It's not a calculation. It's a choice. Every soldier who went into that station knew the risks. They chose to go anyway. Not because someone ordered them. Not because they didn't understand the danger. But because they believed that some things are worth dying for. Such as protecting innocent people from those who would harm them. Such as standing up to evil even when it's dangerous. Such as refusing to let monsters win simply because they're willing to be more ruthless than everyone else." Othran was quiet for a long time. He thought about the Concorde's 11,000 years of peace. He thought about all the conflicts they had resolved through negotiation and compromise. He thought about how proud they had been of their civilized ways, and he thought about how close they had come to letting 42,000 people die because they couldn't imagine any solution except talking. We believed that all beings could be reasoned with, he said finally. We believed that violence was always the wrong answer. We were wrong. You weren't entirely wrong, Chun said. Most beings can be reasoned with. Most conflicts can be solved through discussion. Your way has worked for 11,000 years because most of the species you encountered were rational. They wanted something, and you could find ways to give them at least part of what they wanted. But the Ascended were different. The Ascended wanted extinction. There is no compromise with extinction. There is no negotiation with annihilation. The only response is to stop them, by force if necessary, by any means necessary. Othran nodded slowly. I find myself in an uncomfortable position, Admiral. I have spent my entire life believing in the power of peaceful resolution. Now I must accept that there are enemies who cannot be resolved peacefully. It goes against everything I thought I knew. Chun stood up. Hi, Mediator. Let me share something with you. A piece of wisdom from Earth. Please. Hope for the best. Prepare for the worst. She looked at him steadily. Keep hoping for peace. Keep trying negotiation first. Keep believing that most beings are reasonable. But never forget that some aren't. Never forget that some enemies will not stop until they are stopped. And never forget how to fight. Because someday, you'll meet another species like the Ascended. And when that day comes, talking will only waste time that innocent people don't have. She walked toward the door, then paused. Thank you for listening, High Mediator. I hope you never have to use what I've told you. But I fear you will. She left. Othran sat alone in the conference chamber, thinking about everything he had learned. The Concord would have to change. Not completely. Their peaceful ways had served them well for millennia. But they would need to add something new, something harder, something that understood in a way the old Concord never could, that some enemies simply had to be destroyed. The humans called it the will to fight. Othran was not sure the Concord had it anymore, but perhaps with the right teachers, they could learn. 3 years passed after the Battle of Meridian 7. In that time, the galaxy changed in ways no one had predicted. The Galactic Concord, for the first time in 11,000 years, amended its founding charter. Alongside the ancient institutions of the meditation caste and the diplomatic corps, a new organization was created. They called it the Rapid Response Coalition. The humans led it. That was never in question. But they did not lead alone. Species that had watched the battle from a distance came forward to volunteer. The Threshenak, former warriors who had been civilized by the Concord centuries ago, found that their old instincts were not dead after all. The Vorlon, a species known for their thick armor and tremendous strength, discovered a purpose beyond mining asteroids. Even some of the peaceful species, those who had never known violence, sent their bravest members to learn the human ways of war. Admiral Chun, now older and grayer but no less sharp, was named the coalition's first supreme commander. She stood before the gathered representatives of 100 species, her voice carrying across the great assembly hall. The doctrine of this coalition is simple, she said. We will always seek peace first. We will always try to negotiate. We will always exhaust every possible alternative before we resort to force. That is not going to change. That must never change. She paused, looking out at the faces before her. Some were eager. Some were frightened. Some were uncertain. All were listening. But when we face an enemy that cannot be negotiated with, when we face a threat that wants only destruction, we will not hesitate. We will not debate. We will not spend precious time searching for compromises that do not exist. We will act swiftly, decisively, and we will not stop until the threat is eliminated." A murmur ran through the crowd. These were hard words for species that had never known war. "Some of you are afraid," Chun continued. "That's natural. Fear is healthy. It keeps you alive. But there is something worse than fear. There is the paralysis that comes from believing that all problems can be solved with words. There is the blindness that comes from refusing to see enemies for what they are." She thought of the ascended commander. She thought of his empty eyes and his cold voice. She thought of how close he had come to murdering 42,000 innocent people. The Concorde was built on a beautiful idea that all beings are rational, and all conflicts can be resolved through understanding. For 11,000 years, that idea served you well, but it was never the complete truth. Some beings are not rational. Some conflicts cannot be resolved. Some enemies will not stop until they are stopped. She raised her hand. "We are not here to make war. We are here to prevent it. We are here to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. We are here to be the shield that protects civilization from the darkness that lurks at its edges." The hall was silent. Every eye was fixed on the small human woman who spoke such large words. "When I was young," Chun said, "my grandmother told me a story. She said that wolves do not care about the opinions of sheep. No matter how loudly the sheep complain, no matter how eloquently they argue, the wolves will keep hunting. The only thing that stops wolves is sheepdogs, creatures with the teeth and claws to fight back. Creatures willing to stand in the darkness and face the monsters." She smiled slightly. "The Concorde has been sheep for a very long time. That's not an insult. Sheep are peaceful. Sheep are productive. Sheep build beautiful things. But sheep cannot survive without sheepdogs. And now, finally, you have them." The coalition grew quickly. Training centers were established on a dozen worlds. Human instructors taught species that had never held weapons how to use them. More importantly, they taught them when to use them and when not to. "The hardest lesson," Commander Okonkwo told his students, "is knowing the difference between an enemy who can be reasoned with and an enemy who cannot. Get it wrong in one direction, and you start a war that could have been avoided. Get it wrong in the other direction, and innocent people die while you waste time talking." His students came from every corner of the galaxy. Some learned quickly. Some struggled. But all of them understood, on some level, that the galaxy had changed. The old certainties were gone. The comfortable belief that peace was always possible had been shattered. In its place grew something new. Something harder but also more honest. Years later, a Ziklislar historian named Velosh wrote the definitive account of what happened at Meridian 7 and its aftermath. Velosh had been a member of the Pale Doctrine once. He had believed, as the Ascended believed, that biological life was a mistake. But watching the humans fight and die to save strangers had broken something in him. It had also built something new. He called his book The Human Doctrine. "The humans taught us that morality is not passive," he wrote. "For 11,000 years, we believed that peace was the absence of violence. The humans showed us that peace must be actively defended, that sometimes protecting the innocent requires doing violence to those who would harm them. They taught us that refusing to fight is not always virtuous. Sometimes, refusing to fight is the ultimate cowardice. Sometimes, it means standing by while evil triumphs. Sometimes, the most moral thing you can do is pick up a weapon and stand between the helpless and those who would destroy them." They were not the most advanced species in the galaxy. They were not the oldest or the wisest. They had spent most of their history fighting each other over scraps of land and differences in belief. By our standards, they were primitive, violent, uncivilized. And yet they understood something that 11,000 years of civilization had caused us to forget. They understood that when you face an enemy who wants only your destruction, there is no compromise. There is no negotiation. There is only victory or death. The mortals, it turned out, did not bargain with extremists. They ended them. The book became required reading at every diplomatic academy in the Concord. Its message was uncomfortable but necessary. Peace was still the goal. Negotiation was still the first option. But hidden beneath the soft words and gentle diplomacy, there was now steel. There was the willingness to fight. There was the understanding that some enemies could only be stopped with force. Captain Elena Vasquez retired 5 years after Meridian 7. She settled on a quiet colony world at the edge of human space. She planted a garden. She watched the stars at night. Sometimes visitors came to see her. Students, historians, soldiers looking for wisdom. They asked her the same question that High Mediator Othrin had asked years before. How did you know? Her answer was always the same. I knew because we've been there before. We've had our own monsters, our own extremists, our own people who wanted nothing but destruction. And we learned, through blood and suffering, that the only answer to someone who won't stop is to make them stop. She would look out at the stars, countless points of light in an endless darkness. The galaxy is a big place. There are more monsters out there, more enemies who can't be reasoned with, more threats that won't respond to negotiation. When they come, and they will come, I hope you'll be ready. And how do we get ready? They would ask. Vasquez would smile, a tired but peaceful smile. Hope for the best. Prepare for the worst. And never, ever forget, some lines cannot be crossed. Some evils cannot be tolerated. And some beings, those who would destroy without reason or mercy, must be stopped, whatever the cost. The stars burned on, ancient and eternal. And somewhere among them, the children of Meridian 7 grew up and had children of their own, living their lives in a galaxy that was a little safer because of what happened that day, because of the humans who refused to negotiate. Because of the mortals who did not bargain with extremists.